The Washington Post newsroom delivers breaking events around the world as they happen. Unrivaled reporting from the journalists you've come to trust. To get the facts fast and meet the challenges of today head on. Get the news that matters most with a special offer by visiting WashingtonPost.com/watch. Subscribing unlocks instant access, bringing you the Post's award-winning coverage anytime, any place. Because democracy dies in darkness. Vice President Kamala Harris makes her first public appearance since President Joe Biden dropped out of the 2024 presidential race. I'm Libby Casey. Welcome to live coverage from the Washington Post. Well, what a weekend. A massive shakeup in the presidential race yesterday afternoon when President Joe Biden announced in a written statement that he is no longer seeking the nomination. He will not be the nominee for his party's presidency. This, of course, is such a big deal because he is the incumbent and it's only about 100 days out until the election. Just a half hour later, Biden put out a statement endorsing Kamala Harris. And so now all eyes are on the vice president. She has said that she plans to run, she plans to earn and win her party's nomination. Now, Kamala Harris's event today is on the South Lawn of the White House. It's not a moment for her to talk about running for president. Instead, it is an address to NCAA athletes, college athletes. But we will all be watching very carefully for what she has to say. I'm joined by JM Rieger, senior video journalist, and James Hohmann, columnist. Thank you, both of you, for being here. Now, this event today at the White House was supposed to be hosted by President Biden, but he has COVID and is isolating at his home in Rehoboth. So we don't really know what Kamala Harris is going to do or say here. Why are we still paying such close attention, James?
This is the first time we'll hear from her publicly. We know from reporting Harris was at the Naval Observatory last night. She was wearing her Howard University hoodie, wearing exercise pants and sneakers, eating pizza and salad and working the phones. And
for like 10 hours.
For like 10 hours. And it's been successful. We have a tracker on our homepage right now that looks at all the Democratic members of Congress and governors. 191 of them have already endorsed Harris to be their new nominee. Only 95 have not. Delegations are falling in line. The chairman of the Democratic Governors Association, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, the Democratic Senate Committee, everyone is sort of coalescing around Harris as their new leader much more rapidly, I think, than even a lot of people expected. And so the reason this really matters is because this is the first time for Harris to set the tone. As you noted, she's doing something the president was supposed to be doing. She is now carrying the torch. He is passing her the baton, whatever metaphor you want to use. And the question is, how is she going to carry it? What kind of tone is she going to set? Is she going to address the elephant in the room? I would be shocked if she didn't. A lot of times these NCAA championship things are meant for humor. I assume we'll hear her make some jokes, but maybe not. Maybe she feels the burden and the seriousness of the presidency.
You know, imagine being one of these college athletes who's like been so excited about going to the White House and being part of the celebration, and now you're getting to witness this moment in history, JM. We'll talk about Biden more in a few moments, but let's keep focused on Kamala Harris. So who were the Democrats that you've been watching to see if they would step up and endorse her? Because, you know, as she said, she wants to earn and win this. It's not a given that she's the nominee.
There was a huge time crunch from Democrats for a few weeks now, the 3 weeks plus since the debate, because they knew that there was this virtual roll call that the DNC had set up the first week of August where they were going to formally nominate Biden because they claimed they needed to because of an Ohio law, even though Ohio had already changed that law. This is remarkable, though, in how quickly the wagons have become circled around Harris in, less than 24 hours, 18 hours or so here. I think what's also notable is the folks that we thought would potentially challenge her in a hypothetical open convention, contested convention scenario have all come out and endorsed her. Gretchen Whitmer, Pete Buttigieg, Josh Shapiro, Andy Beshear, J.B. Pritzker, go down the list, right, as James was just referencing. And even folks who, Lloyd Doggett from Texas, representative from Texas, Democrat, was the first person to call for Biden to drop out. And he was on a couple of the networks last night and was saying that, in his words, quote, no disrespect to Harris, but he would like to see an open process. But he seems to have been left in the dust here a little bit with how quickly the rest of the Democratic caucus in Congress and how quickly these Democratic governors and even delegations have just gotten completely on board with Harris.
We were watching Joe Manchin, who has actually left the Democratic Party, but sort of seemed to be hinting this morning that he might jump back in. He's also, like the congressman was saying, there should be choices, right? There should be, but what do we know about Joe Manchin now?
Everyone's thinking about sort of their own political future. I mean, Joe Manchin, I watched the Sunday shows yesterday. He said it's time for Biden to pass the torch.
That was before Biden passed the torch.
actually said, would you run? And he said, no, I'm not even a Democrat anymore. Right. And then like 12 hours later, it's sort of like people
on the morning
close
talk
to,
shows,
yeah.
though, he was like, it was all going in different directions.
And then
like,
he changed his mind again.
Will he, won't he? Right.
I mean, in some ways, Joe Manchin would have been the perfect foil for Kamala Harris, just because you think about the delegates, you think about the nature, it would show that she sort of earned it, that it wasn't just a coronation, that she wasn't anointed.
Wait, I want you to pause there for a moment. When you say that he would be the perfect, like a foil for her,
yeah.
So she could say, no, I'm going to go head to head with this guy. We're going to air it out. We're going to talk about what the Democratic Party wants to see, what it wants its future to be. So he could have been useful to her in a way.
He could have.
Mm-hmm.
And
Pritzker possibly even too.
Pritzker, who's the heir to the Hilton family fortune. The real thing, Pritzker wants it. Everyone wants it. Is the VP, and
I
that's
don't
what.
want it.
Yeah, I know. I don't want it either.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Everyone wants to be her vice presidential
The real
pick.
contest now is that everyone is sort of positioning themselves to be the number two. Andy Beshear got reelected last year in Kentucky, obviously a very Republican state. He distanced himself so hard from Biden and Harris. I was out there watching him say, like, I'm not paying any attention to any of that stuff. And he was on Morning Joe this morning going off on J.D. Vance, trying to very much play the role of attack dog vice president and saying, I'd be very open if someone called and asked me to be VP. And you're seeing, I think Pritzker would love it, Whitmer, Wes Moore, Roy Cooper. A lot of these people are coming out of the woodwork and basically trying to get in line so that they can be considered seriously for the nomination. Pete Buttigieg, and so it is sort of. I'm not sure anyone real is going to run other than Marianne Williamson against Kamala Harris. And that doesn't mean it's not an open process. There's still, you still could have some forums. I think the Harris team is very nervous about the idea that it's just sort of being handed to her and that they're short-circuiting the process. That's why you hear the language about I'm going to go earn it. And so I think she'll have to do some things to convey, starting with this event we're carrying, that she wants to earn the support of Democrats.
Yes, and Manchin, I'll just briefly mentioned Beshear and Shapiro. This was before Biden announced he dropped out, but he's like, in the hypothetical of an open convention, these are two neighboring states, and I really would like to see them in the contest here. So to the extent that Manchin has any sway in this process, right, those are two names that we've heard mentioned in the sort of Veep stakes. We'll see if they surface.
We're looking at a live shot of the White House, the South Lawn, and it's a little bit rainy out there. If you live in Washington, you know that. If you don't, here to break the news to you, playing the role of weather person as well as news anchor. So what we have here is this really joyful celebration of college athletes, the NCAA, the National Collegiate Athletic Association. And we have no expectation that Kamala Harris is going to use this moment to launch her political ambitions, because this is at the White House. This is not a campaign event. But she knows all eyes are on her. She knows the focus is on her. And this is a moment where she needs to both appear, it's a lot, presidential, authoritative, and yet loose, joyful, happy to see these young athletes, James.
We're 107 days out from the election. It's really not that much time. And she needs to set the tone right away, hit the ground running. And part of the thing here is she wants to look presidential now. So much of the criticism of Joe Biden has been his age. And she's only 59 years old. She's 59. She's, a solid 20 years younger than her likely Republican opponent. And so I think when you're with all these young people, firing up Gen Z, turning out young people who've been not excited about Joe Biden, this is almost a tailor-made opportunity for her to kind of show that she can feed off the energy of young folks.
Our colleague, video journalist Anna Liss-Roy, is at the White House and joins us now by phone. Anna, just set the scene for us. We're getting some pictures there from the South Lawn. It looks like a ton of people. What is the energy like?
Hey, Libby. Yeah, I'm out here doing my best to stay dry. I mean, honestly, walking into the complex, it felt like a normal day. Of course, it's anything but. Harris is about to speak at an event here on the South Lawn of the White House, celebrating this season's NCAA Championship team. So you're looking at a lot of college athletes, I'm guessing. I mean, I wasn't expecting this many people, but it makes sense. This is her first appearance, of course, since Biden announced stepping down from the race. And so I'm told it's a rare event in which Harris is hosting people on the South Lawn by herself. So as you said, what would normally be a lower profile celebratory event, it has a lot of eyeballs. There's a lot of media here. Definitely a sense of energy and obviously a lot of questions. We don't know yet if Harris will talk about President Biden or their partnership or anything else or even mention him at all. But it's a shifting moment. I mean, she's gone from this loyal VP to running for president herself. So I'll be watching her body language. How comfortable does she seem? Is she pumped up? Like you said, it's not a campaign event, but we can read between the lines of like what this appearance means to her today and how she's showing up. So, you know, she does events like this all the time, but we're all feeling the serious undertones today.
Absolutely. Anna, after the news broke yesterday that Joe Biden was stepping out of the race, you hit the town and talked to Americans, tourists who were here in Washington, as well as people who were wishing Joe Biden well outside the White House. Tell us, who did you talk to and what did they have to say?
Yeah, I schlepped down to the White House and some loyal Biden supporters were gathered. I mean, it was emotional. Some brought their kids. They had signs and balloons saying, "Thank you, President Biden." It wasn't that many people. I don't want to like over exaggerate, but the people who showed up, it was really meaningful for them to be there. They told me they wanted to express appreciation for Biden's years of service. And even though Biden wasn't there, the White House was where they could go to show their respect. And I also went to the National Mall to talk to people there about Biden's decision to drop out. Very mixed emotions. I mean, a lot of shock. I went like right after the announcement dropped, so I was breaking the news to some people. Some said they did see it coming, though. One Democrat told me she's devastated. A Trump supporter I spoke with said, hey, I mean, this is a smart move by Democrats. He thinks that this is going to make the race more competitive for them. And I also heard excitement about, you know, a younger candidate, a woman of color running. And so even among people who were sad or surprised about Biden stepping aside, general consensus was definitely that they are ready to get on board with Harris or whoever the nominee is. And I heard that from Biden supporters outside the White House, too.
Anna Liss-Roy, video journalist who is on the South Lawn of the White House for this moment in history, watching Vice President Kamala Harris speak to college athletes. But the big focus is on her because we know she's running for president and she hopes to lock up the Democratic nomination. JM, let's talk about polling and how Kamala Harris does as a candidate.
Yeah, Washington Post did a poll in early July asking question if Harris were to, or if Biden were to step aside, who would you like to see step in?
And I want to just pause you there because it's after the debate.
It's after the debate.
When this suddenly became a real question of whether Biden could stay in the race, would stay in the race, and then what would happen. So this was starting to become on people's minds.
Correct, and it's actually a good point because we didn't have a ton of polling before the debate because why would you poll that question when you only have a limited number of questions to poll? So 29% of respondents in that poll said they'd like to see Harris, and that was the biggest name that was in that list, but the majority said other candidates or skip the question. So this is, as James was just talking about, this is a chance today for Harris to start to define herself because we're so close to the election. This race has been remarkably static, and even after the debate, the Washington Post polling average only had it moving about 2.5 points in the national poll to Trump. Now, Trump against Biden was ahead in 6 of the 7 battleground states that the Washington Post was tracking, but 3 of those, the blue wall states, were in the margin of error, which means they're a statistical tie. So Harris now has sort of a Herculean task in some ways to start to close that gap. And I say Herculean just because we are so close to the election, and voters are going to have to get familiar with her. She's going to have to get out there and introduce herself, even though she's been in the White House for 3.5 years here.
All right, we're watching the White House in just a moment. James, what will you be listening for and watching for Kamala Harris today?
Yeah, the fresh dose of energy. I mean, they raised on Act Blue, the Democratic fundraising platform, more than $60 million. Last night, it's the most money raised in a single day on the platform since October of 2020. The most ever, I actually think, but it hasn't been anything close to that. And so I do think JM's absolutely right. This isn't about moving the people in the middle. This is about galvanizing the base. There were a lot of Democrats after that June 27th debate who were like, oh, do I have to go vote for Joe Biden? And Kamala Harris, if she's the nominee, gives them a reason to go out and vote, to get excited again. And that's one of the reasons that down ballot Democrats have so quickly rallied behind her. And I also think, one of the reasons we haven't seen anyone challenging her is people don't want to get blamed for Democrats losing on the Democratic side. And you don't want to, 107 days out from the election, spend 3 weeks kind of beating up on Harris only to have her get the nomination and then go into the real final stretch wounded.
It's already been a little bit of a risk how much and some Democrats, Debbie Dingell said this yesterday, that they're concerned about, in her words, the knives that have been put in Joe Biden's back. So there's already potentially been some damage there, but we'll see how much Harris can kind of rectify the base, re-energize, to your point.
I'm so curious to see, as we get more polls and more information from how voters are thinking, what those voters who just felt so apathetic about Joe Biden, or were what we call the double haters, right, the people who didn't like either candidate, if they do see this as a fresh start, if they do want to evaluate someone new who they think brings new energy to it.
And that is exactly why this speech matters. I mean, one of the big questions is sort of how much Kamala Harris distances herself, and how much continuity, how much change, right?
But one question is, James, what did people not like about Biden, right? And that's part of what we've been trying to probe as journalists. Is it, I mean, you just hear over and over, age, concerns about his age. But that's different than the policies in place and what he actually did as president.
Right, and so, for example, the border. I mean, that was such a focus last week.
At the RNC.
At the RNC. Biden gave Harris the portfolio of looking at the root causes of illegal immigration, and there was still the border surge. And so Republicans are eager to go after Harris and say she was responsible for the border, and the border has been a disaster. On the other hand, maybe Harris has some flexibility that Biden doesn't, to move toward the younger protesters on Gaza, and she can distance herself a little bit from what the administration has done vis-a-vis its support for Israel. I mean, she's not going to get into that in this NCAA speech, right? Like, here's a list of 6 unpopular things that Biden did that I don't support. But I think what we're going to start to watch is sort of how much. I assume she's going to say a bunch of nice things about Joe Biden. I mean, that is her role. She has been a loyal VP, but she might say, I'm my own person. In 1988, George H.W. Bush ran to replace Reagan, and he had this whole thing, I'm going to be a kinder, gentler conservative. And that was about sort of trying to massage the rough edges of the Reagan years. And I think Harris is going to have to come up with some formulation, too, where she doesn't want to seem like she's repudiating her running mate. And Biden, does sort of represent this sort of historically a working class blue collar appeal, and Republicans are going to try to run against Harris as this San Francisco liberal, and Joe Biden is Scranton Joe. So she doesn't want to seem like she's rejecting that part of the Biden ethos.
Well, that's where the vice presidential pick, if she does indeed get the nomination, may be so very important. Let's talk about her history as a prosecutor and, of course, a senator. And a lot of people have been saying, who don't like Trump, that they want someone who's strong enough and agile enough to prosecute the case against Donald Trump. And that was a real disappointment point in that debate, not just that Biden lost his train of thought a bit, but that he didn't seem to be able to go after Donald Trump. So how does that background help or alter or hurt her in this moment?
I think we're going to see Harris talk. We've already sort of heard some rumblings of this. I think we're going to hear her talk, or at least her campaign make reference to, especially her time in the Senate. She was on the Senate Judiciary Committee questioning Trump's Supreme Court picks as they were coming through. That is a central issue because abortion's a central issue in this campaign, and we know that those justices were on the court when the Dobbs decision came down. The other thing is, I think what James was just talking about on energizing the base is so important here because Biden has had an enthusiasm issue throughout this race. And if Harris can come in and what her kind of allies have sort of suggested so far in the airwaves is, quote unquote, prosecute the case against Trump. If they can galvanize the base more, that could potentially shift the dynamics of this race because Trump, for as much as we talk about how Biden didn't make up the ground that he needed to post the debate and polls sort of shifted Trump's way, it's still, like we just said, the blue wall states are within the margin of error in the Washington Post polling average. So that's a warning sign for Trump that he wasn't able to gain even more ground in some ways. And Trump also, much like Biden, has a lot of negatives. People have a lot of unfavorable views of former President Trump. So if Harris can come in with a little bit of a fresh slate, refer to some of her work both in the White House but also in the Senate, I think that could potentially build some momentum on her side.
You mentioned abortion, you mentioned Dobbs, right? Yeah. I mean, I do think Harris is going to be able to drive the abortion message much more forcefully.
She's already been doing it.
Joe Biden
out on the campaign as part of the Biden-Harris team. She's been the messenger. The person. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean that's and like, you know, Joe Biden is a devout Catholic. I think he's personally uncomfortable with abortion. He doesn't actually like to use what White House aides call the A word because it still makes him uncomfortable. Kamala Harris is happy to go out there in terms of prosecuting the case. And I think that issue has faded a little bit just because Trump said it should be left to the states and Biden hasn't been talking about it as much. And here's a chance to revive, which could help in some of these battleground states.
Yes.
So what you're seeing on your screen is a shot of the South Lawn of the White House. We're waiting for Vice President Kamala Harris to come out and address these college athletes. It's a NCAA gathering. This is the kind of thing that the president would normally do, but Joe Biden is in Delaware, where he is isolating because he still has COVID. And so Kamala Harris is stepping into this moment, and what a moment to step in, both literally and metaphorically, because we are all watching her to see everything from how she carries herself to the sartorial choices she makes to how she addresses this lawn full of young people as she gets ready to show the nation that she wants to be the President of the United States. It's not a done deal yet. Let's talk about the process that would have to go forward at this point for Kamala Harris to become the Democratic nominee, James.
So a lot of state delegations are meeting over Zoom already in the last 12 hours. Maryland, North Carolina, one or two others have already said we're going to give all of our delegates, and that matters in this case, to Kamala Harris. The DNC is still eyeing a virtual roll call the first week of August, so potentially August 1st, because they say they want to get, I think they want this to get wrapped up. They don't want a messy floor fight, but to get them on the ballot, to get Kamala Harris, and more importantly, as importantly, her running mate. So she'll have to announce a running mate.
And that's important because it's
convention.
such an unknown.
It's not
like it's more important than the presidency.
Right.
It's just that it's like total wild card.
Right, because you could already write Kamala Harris's name, and if if she wraps it up. But so it's meeting various state deadlines because in the old days you used to have a lot longer, but now people start voting in early September with early voting and absentee.
Yeah, and this also comes back to this Ohio law, right, where Ohio has had this, they had to temporarily extend the deadline for both Obama in 2012 and for Trump in 2020 because they said that you have to be on the ballot 90 plus days before Election Day per Ohio law, but they passed these extensions. Earlier this year, it was floated that Ohio wouldn't pass an extension for Biden, and DeWine had to call a special session to bring him back. Mike DeWine, the Republican governor of Ohio. And so Ohio has since passed, first the DNC in late May said we're going to do this virtual roll call nomination because we don't want to risk this.
And late May was before the catastrophic debate.
And late May was before the debate. A few days later, Ohio passed the extension, so now that's till September 1 to be officially on the ballot.
But the idea was already on the table to have this virtual roll call.
The idea was already on the table, and to James's point, they want to. What the DNC says is they quote unquote can't trust Ohio Republicans to put that, and DeWine and Republican Secretary of State in Ohio, Frank LaRose, say that's nonsense, that this will be on the ballot. And we've heard some election lawyers also say that this is a non-issue now. But Democrats are saying that at least at this point, that they need to James's point, do the virtual roll call to get the and I think it's politically so they get
we can
this
be
wrapped
honest.
up. Yes.
Yes. I mean, they want to get this wrapped up. This is about politics.
Yes.
You know, it's not actually. I think that they want to get this done. They want Kamala Harris to be their nominee.
So we now know that the Vice President Kamala Harris will travel to Wilmington, Delaware later today for a campaign engagement. So that's what they're saying about the language they're using about what she is doing.
So that's where President Biden is in Rehoboth Beach at his beach house, which is a solid hour-and-a-half drive from Wilmington. Wilmington is where the campaign headquarters is. It's really interesting because Harris is essentially getting this turnkey operation
in Wilmington, Delaware.
In Wilmington, Delaware. Not even Philadelphia, like in 2020. And so I assume she's going to go speak to the staff. I've talked to a lot of Biden campaign staffers. I spent a lot of time in Wilmington, Delaware. They've been incredibly depressed and disheartened. And so I think this is going to be sort of a pep talk, but also a kind of rally around the flag event.
And one of the other reasons why we heard that this kind of the Harris pick, if you will, obviously she hasn't been formally nominated yet, but why that made sense was because the kind of campaign war chest, if you will, the money can go much more easier to Harris because the donations are coming in on Biden and Harris. There were ways to, sending it to a super PAC or something else to get around that, but that was one of the other things that I think helped with the momentum here, where Harris was able to just kind of, in a remarkable fashion in some ways, kind of quickly circle the wagons. There's very little dissent at this point in terms of suggesting other options on the top of the ticket.
It was also hard because, you couldn't do too much pre-planning. You couldn't say, like, hey, are you going to be with me if Biden drops out? Because that would be viewed as disloyalty.
Yeah, getting out the knives.
Exactly.
Right.
And
no one wanted to be seen as getting out the knives.
And one of the most interesting quotes last night after Biden dropped came from John Fetterman, Democratic senator from Pennsylvania, who's been very loyal to Biden.
Yeah.
And he was complaining about all the statements praising the president as he stepped aside from people who had been pushing him to get out and said, their fingerprints are all over the knife in his back. And so I think that there is some, ill will, there's some bad blood, there are some hurt feelings. I think the president himself is frustrated and feels betrayed by some of his former allies, including Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi, who he feels like really undercut him and made it untenable for him to continue in the race. I
just want to point you to what we're seeing on the screen, a bunch of young Americans coming together to be celebrated for athletics. And so this is such a diverse group. It's a young group, and Kamala Harris gets to stand with them and in front of them. And even though this is not a campaign event, what an optic to have as your first visual moment in front of the American people as a presidential candidate.
Well, it's also remarkable because this is an event that we would cover here at the Post, but probably not with the rigor that everyone has their eyeballs on right now.
We cover every event with rigor.
We cover every event with rigor.
The sports team is probably like, why are you guys inching in on our turf here? This is what we do.
Right. But I think it's remarkable, right? It's great optics. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if she comes out and she has to avoid a lot of campaign rhetoric, but she could make remarks about Biden and how great Biden's been, whether on this issue specifically or more broadly.
All right, we're seeing the Vice President, Kamala Harris, all those young people with their phones up to capture this moment in history as Kamala Harris makes her first public appearance since Joe Biden dropped out of the presidential race. Let's go live to the White House South Lawn.
Good morning. I'm Linda Teeler, Senior Vice President for Championships at the NCAA. You've been asked to sit, please. I'd like to thank President Biden and Vice President Harris for organizing this event today. This is an incredible backdrop to celebrate incredible achievement. I want to start by congratulating all of you on your successful season. There are more than 500 student athletes in more than 1,000 NCAA institutions across the country. Many of those teams and student athletes started the season with the goal of achieving a national championship. You all have done that. You're the best in your sport. You've crossed that finish line. You will forever be NCAA champions. Congratulations. For the student athletes here, I hope that you take a moment to truly appreciate what you've achieved. Whether it's your first NCAA championship or one of many, what you've done is remarkable. In addition to your success on the field, many of you are using your platform that success has brought to do really incredible things, to engage your communities, to become entrepreneurs, to represent your families and your friends, to serve in leadership roles across the NCAA, at your conference, and on your campus. What you do and how you do it is an inspiration, and we thank you. For the coaches here today, I hope you also take a moment to truly appreciate the season. I know for many of you, it is natural, it's in your nature to turn the page, look to the next season, start planning for the next championship. But for all of you, I hope that you, again, take a moment to truly appreciate what you've accomplished. It is incredible, and you also will forever be known as national championship coaches. Congratulations. Having worked on a college campus for over 21 years, I understand that it takes teamwork to make this particular dream work. And so I want to make sure we shout out those athletic trainers, medical personnel, strength and conditioning coaches. Yep, let's go, right? Academic advisors, media relations folks, all of you that make this possible for student athletes to achieve their dreams. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for pouring into them and how you do it, taking care of them and loving them and supporting them in every way. Thank you. Again, thank you for allowing us to celebrate you today, for being here, making the trip. We appreciate it, and we appreciate being part of your special day. And now it's my distinct honor to introduce the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris.
Greetings, everyone. Greetings. And Linda, I want to thank you for all you do to support these extraordinary student athletes. And it is good to be here with so many leaders, including, of course, members of Congress, members of our administration, and our extraordinary athletes. Our president, Joe Biden, wanted to be here today. He is feeling much better and recovering fast, and he looks forward to getting back on the road. And I wanted to say a few words about our president. Joe Biden's legacy of accomplishment over the past 3 years is unmatched in modern history. In one term, he has already, yes, you may clap. In one term, he has already surpassed the legacy of most presidents who have served 2 terms in office. And I first came to know President Biden through his son, Beau. We worked together as attorneys general in our states, and back then, Beau would often tell me stories about his dad. He would talk about the kind of father and the kind of man that Joe Biden is. The qualities that Beau revered in his father are the same qualities that I have seen every day in our president. His honesty, his integrity, his commitment to his faith and his family, his big heart, and his love, deep love of our country. And I am firsthand witness that every day our President Joe Biden fights for the American people, and we are deeply, deeply grateful for his service to our nation. And so with that, on behalf of our President and Dr. Biden, I am honored to welcome all of you to the White House to celebrate the achievements of these great athletes. Every one of them is a national champion, a national champion. In America, tens of millions of people play a sport as a child, and the best of the best grow up to become national champions. Here today, we have 7 undefeated teams, 11 repeat champions, and 20 first-time winners. Some of you have represented our nation on the international stage in World Cups and World Championships. And later this month, 6 of you will represent our nation at the 2024 Olympics in Paris. As members of Team USA, you are ambassadors for our nation, and with pride, we will cheer you on. and we look forward to congratulating you when you bring home the gold. So to all of our athletes, I know it was not easy to make it to this moment. Each of you has faced challenges and obstacles, and you have endured. You have fought back and fought through. By doing so, you demonstrated that true greatness requires more than skill. It requires grit and determination. You all know what it means to commit and to persevere. And you know what it means to count on teammates. During the course of a long season, sports teams become a family. You rely on each other. You develop relationships that will last a lifetime. And you make the people around you better in every way. And when you play, you inspire people across our nation. You remind all of us what can be achieved with hard work and ambition. And of course, none of you made it here alone. Today, you are surrounded by the people who stood by you every step of this journey. The folks who support you on and off the field, your friends, your family members, your coaches, your trainers, and teachers who for years have cheered you on. So today, again, let us give them a round of applause. And in conclusion, I say to our athletes, congratulations again on all you have accomplished, and good luck on all that is to come. Wherever you all go from here, you will always, and know this, you will always be champions, and we will always be so proud of you. And so now it is my honor to welcome to the stage Jordan Dudley, who plays on the Florida State University women's soccer team and our U20 women's national team. Please welcome Jordan.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Jordan Dudley, and I'm a member of the 2023 National Championship Florida State soccer team. Thank you, President Biden and Vice President Harris, for this wonderful opportunity to visit the White House and to celebrate the achievements in college athletics. My freshman year at FSU was a dream come true. I played with and against the most talented women in college soccer. None of this would have been possible if it wasn't for the support of our administration, coaches, and athletic staff at FSU. They provided the resources to help us succeed in the classroom, in sports, and in life. The family environment created by my teammates helped us push each other to achieve our team goals, including earning the program's 4th national championship after an undefeated season. We all know the demands of being a college student athlete has its challenges, but reaching the end of the season with a trophy in hand made all of our hard work, studying, and training worthwhile. Congratulations to all of my fellow athletes for your hard work and accomplishments. You've achieved the dream of many, thus inspiring the next generation as they work towards their goals. My challenge to each of you today is to always find that something that keeps you motivated and inspired. And once you find that something, use it to inspire and encourage those around you and future generations. To the Biden-Harris administration, thank you again for this unforgettable opportunity. Well done.
The NCAA Championships, these are the victors who Kamala Harris praised for being really the top athletes in America, some of whom will even go on to the Olympics in just a little while. This is live coverage from the Washington Post. Kamala Harris making her first public statement since Joe Biden dropped out of the 2024 presidential race. And Vice President Harris praised Joe Biden. She reassured everyone that he is recovering fast and is looking forward to getting back to sounded like almost like the campaign trail, really, the way she talked about it, although he would have a very different role if he does indeed do that. And she talked about his son, Beau Biden, and used that as the vehicle to get in to talk about all the things that she said she admires about him: his honesty, his integrity, his commitment to faith and family, big heart, and deep love of our country. A short speech, but JM, did she do what she needed to do here?
Felt like she did what she needed to do. She broadly praised President Biden. At this moment, she kind of needs to bring together the party, unite them. We've heard that over and over again from Democrats. She talked about Biden's legacy, about how in one term he's already surpassed what folks have done in 2 terms. She talked about his honesty, his integrity, his deep love for the country, in her words, and said she's deeply, deeply grateful to his service. So this was a moment where Harris, we talked about how she can't really talk as much in campaign rhetoric because it's an official event at the White House, but I think she sort of hit on the point she needed to hit on as she now kind of springboards into some campaign events this week.
And then she also pivoted it back to the athletes, who this event is really about. If you're a young person who's come from across the country to get to this White House event, it's about you, it's about your accomplishments and your coaches. It's, you know, there's a little bit of other stuff going on right now, but it's really about you. Let's bring Anna Liss-Roy with us over the phone. Anna is a video journalist who is there at the White House. Anna, you know, so many young people had their phones out to record this moment. What was it like to be there?
That's exactly what I was going to say, Libby. The phones shot up as the VP walked in. I mean, these students obviously excited to be here, to be celebrated as national champions, but they had a lot more eyes on them today than they may have expected. You know, Harris started off kind of cutting to the chase with President Biden not being here, but recovering fast. You know, praising his legacy. She called it unmatched in modern history. Rattled through his policy achievements. Talked about Beau, you know, their work. She worked with him as Attorney General, and talked about how Beau would talk about his dad and that she's the qualities she's seen in the president. So, you know, interesting to hone in on what she highlighted: honesty, integrity, faith, family. These are the themes we've, you know, heard kind of surrounding Biden as a president, and she thanked him for his service. So, like you said, she pivoted to the athletes and talked about hard work, grit, determination. You definitely see the parallels, you know, like you guys are saying, not a campaign speech, but she's here at the White House speaking alone. I mean, it's a pretty presidential look, and it's hard to ignore that. So now, I mean, the event is over now, short and sweet. People are milling around. I'll be talking to students about what it's like to be honored here in the middle of a historic moment.
All right, meet some cool athletes, Anna. Get some sources for the Olympics. That sounds like the
working on it, Libby.
Thanks so much, Anna Liss-Roy, joining us live from the South Lawn of the White House. James, what is on your mind at this moment as you think about what Kamala Harris has to do right now?
Kamala Harris has decided, she's signaling here, obviously she has to say nice things. She is going to own the Biden-Harris record. She may as well lean into it. And you know, this argument that he accomplished more in 1 term than most people accomplish in 2 terms, you can debate that. But she's going to try to claim the successes, and then I think she'll find ways to distance herself from the more unpopular elements. But part of getting the party to rally behind you is carrying the torch, saying, I am the inheritor of the Biden legacy. Something I'm going to be fascinated by is what happens to President Biden's approval rating now that he's stepped aside, now that he's not an active candidate who's going to be getting attacked every day by Donald Trump, and who we're all sort of watching with bated breath to see whether he has verbal gaffes. Is he seen as more of a statesman? How does he spend the final few months of his administration? How much is he going to be out on the campaign trail for Kamala Harris or whoever the Democratic nominee is in the swing states, maybe trying to reach some of the targeted groups among whom he's still popular, like seniors? How much is he going to say, look, I'm going to be president for 5 more months. I'm going to travel the world and be a statesman and go to Ukraine and you know, be a figure on the world stage. And some of that will be how much Kamala Harris wants him. It is, as we said right before that event, she is going to, I guess it's their campaign headquarters, but now her campaign headquarters in Wilmington, Delaware, and she is inheriting his operation, which is staffed with a lot of his longtime loyalists. So that also makes any effort to sort of distance herself from him a little bit harder.
As she was giving a speech to the athletes, I was thinking she could have just given that same speech to the campaign folks she's going to see later on today. Grit, determination, you know, count on your teammates during the course of a long season. Sports become a family. You know, it's sort of like
politics.
Yes,
yeah.
we're in this,
Yeah.
but we'll be watching, of course, to see just how much of that old campaign staff is retained and what happens to the infrastructure that Team Biden-Harris built as it becomes Team Harris. Well, we will be watching to see everything as it unfolds in the coming weeks. I mean, really 24 hours can be a game changer if we just review all the things that have happened in the past 2 weeks. Let me turn you back, JM, to what you're watching in the next 24 hours in terms of Harris being able to coalesce Democrats behind her.
Yeah, so I want to start from a place of humility. I think, James, at the end of our convention coverage last week, when we were talking about the potential of Biden dropping out of the race, you made a remark that was very prescient now, that this was shaping up to be potentially the most interesting election cycle of our lives. And I think that is 100% nail on the head at this point. We are in uncharted waters right now, and I think we have to throw a lot of our assumptions and conventional wisdom about this race out the window at this point, because while we have all this pre-debate polling, post-debate polling before Biden was out of the race, we don't have polling now with Harris as the presumptive nominee of the party. And obviously, how much more unity do they have, for one? How many more Democrats do they circle the wagons? Is anyone standing out on that limb trying to challenge her or trying to push for more of an open convention? That's, I think, a big question. And then the other thing is, what sort of momentum can she pick up this week? Because every single event that she has are going to be covered. The press is going to be all over this story. And this is going to likely dominate the headlines this week. J.D. Vance and Donald Trump have their first joint interview tonight on Fox at 8 p.m. But I, in some ways, this yet again is dominating the headlines. We talked about how last week this was a little bit of a secondary story, but it was still kind of permeating above the surface of the headlines. And now it seems like this is going to be, and so it's a huge moment for Democrats to capture that momentum and kind of propel themselves forward.
Yeah, we are not talking about Donald Trump and J.D. Vance.
It will be fascinating to see how Trump and Vance attack Harris.
Well, I do have to point out last night on Truth Social, which not a lot of people are looking at, except I feel like it's journalists, right? And Trump's most hardcore base, but the journalists then amplify what Trump says on Truth Social, his social media platform. He was really going off the rails a little bit. I mean, it was really all over the place.
He said he wanted to be reimbursed for all the money that he spent attacking Biden. I mean, he said that he doesn't want to debate.
He didn't seem to know how to respond.
How to attack her.
Yeah.
I mean, they did. I will say,
it had a flailing feel, which is
feel.
surprising because I think the infrastructure of the campaign has been preparing.
Exactly.
We certainly saw that last week at the RNC, and I was talking to people about their preparedness to shift over to Harris. But Trump, left to his own, social media devices, didn't seem to have a clear way to go after her.
Yeah, and so let me say, I think that Biden maybe sort of began to come to terms with the fact that he was going to drop out, not this past weekend, but the weekend before. He met privately, which we knew about, with Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader, and they had this kind of heart-to-heart conversation, and Schumer said, think about your legacy, think about down-ballot Senate races. You were in the Senate for 36 years, and what I'm told, Biden said to Schumer is, give me a week. Give me a week, let's get through the RNC. Now, that may have been buying some time, right? Hoping the conversation would change. It also might have been a reflection that Biden was saying, let's get through the RNC, let's let them spend all week attacking me, and then I'll step aside. And maybe he thought there'd be a way that he could sort of bounce back or whatever. And I think COVID added to the difficulties, and he just couldn't catch a break. And Nancy Pelosi really was turning the squeeze on him. But I'm told that when Schumer left Biden in Rehoboth, the two men gave each other an extended hug, and that it was a very emotional moment. And so I do think this has sort of been on Biden's mind. And in retrospect, perhaps, I heard from a Trump world person who was saying maybe if you're running against Kamala Harris for sure as Trump, you pick a different VP nominee Vance sort of made sense when they were really confident. You wanted a mini-me. You wanted to double down on MAGA and Trumpism. And now I do think that at the top of the Republican side, Trump is flailing. We already saw an ad that the Trump team is running in Pennsylvania, attacking Kamala Harris and saying, what did she know? When did she know it? And basically
about
trying to
Biden's,
go at
Biden's mental acuity and ability to remain as president and remain as the candidate.
And so I think that's a signal. I mean, that ad was in the can, right? That they just pushed it out of, when you hear Kamala Harris say his honesty and integrity, I think you are going to see Republicans try to run at Kamala Harris and say she was part of the cover-up, that she knew that Biden wasn't up for the task and she covered for him, and to try to undermine her trustworthiness. We'll see if it works, but I assume that Trump is going to be much less flailing tonight in the interview than he was on Truth Social last night, where he really was characteristically unhinged.
And I just want to say one thing about that, because you brought up a really important point. We don't know how Joe Biden's poll numbers may change now that he's no longer the presumptive nominee, because there may be some grace that people give him in this moment. And as people reflect on his accomplishments and what it means to step aside, he does have some runway now to show how he wants to end his presidency and his political career. So we'll see if the what did you know, when did you know it actually goes anywhere. People are kind of like ready to move on. So, or are they going to double down and dig in? It remains to be seen. And final thoughts from you, JM.
Well, and also, how do they talk about that, right?
Yeah.
Whenever Biden talks on camera about this at some point here in the near future, we would expect, what does he say? How does he kind of rationalize this decision and explain it? And what does Harris say when she does her first interview on this, when she does her first campaign event? How does she talk about this? That, I think, is going to be a key also in terms of how these things pivot, how they sort of springboard forward here.
All right. Well, thank you so much to James, JM, Anna, Liss-Roy, and all of our colleagues who've been breaking news on this story right and left over the last 24 hours. I'm Libby Casey. We appreciate you spending time with us today. Please stay tuned to the Washington Post as we bring you more news and more groundbreaking moments of this unprecedented campaign. Thank you.
The Washington Post newsroom delivers breaking events around the world as they happen. Unrivaled reporting from the journalists you've come to trust. To get the facts fast and meet the challenges of today head on. Get the news that matters most with a special offer by visiting WashingtonPost.com/watch. Subscribing unlocks instant access, bringing you the Post's award-winning coverage anytime, any place. Because democracy dies in darkness.